Okay. Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So let me transition to my next slide. Before we get started and I introduce the speaker, I do just want to briefly discuss who I am and the series overall, because we do have participants today from outside OSU. So my name is Colton Holmes, and I'm of the Seneca, Cayuga, and Cherokee Nation tribes, and I currently serve as the graduate programs recruiter at the OSU Center for Health Sciences here in Tulsa. So if you're unfamiliar with our campus, you can see here where we are in Tulsa in relation to downtown and Riverside. And so I also want to highlight our campus in Tahlequah. So we now have the College of Osteopathic Medicine at the Cherokee Nation, which is the first tribally affiliated medical school in the United States. And I believe I saw Dr. Brayon. So the social consciousness series, for those of you unfamiliar, or if this is your first one, this is a speaker series presented by the Graduate Programs Office, where each semester we invite 2 to 3 speakers to highlight student populations, social phenomena within higher education. So today's session is the 3rd one of the semester, and you can see here the sessions that we had in September and October. So that brings us to today's session with Dr. McKay on the topic of resistance, resilience, and reclamation, exploring academic success among Native and Indigenous students. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McKay and allow her to introduce herself. So thank you, Dr. McKay, for joining us and leading this session today.
You are so welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. So let me get started here so that maybe we can have time for questions, right? So, Hische, Estango, Dwanna McKay, Jifkados, Estem Muscogee, Nogazagi Doez, Colorado College, Mahaya Doez, Ligabuxchi, Meadow. I just said hello. How are you? My name is Dwanna McKay. I'm Muscogee. My clan is Bear, and I'm a teacher at Colorado College. So welcome, that's Ligabuxchi. Welcome to my talk titled Resistance, Resilience, and Reclamation, Exploring Academic Success Among Native Indigenous Students. Mado, that's thank you for being here. Also, I'd like to really thank Colton Holmes for the invitation to be here and the graduate program. It's an honor and a privilege to share this time with you. Before I go any further, I thought it might be helpful to give you a bit of background about me. I'm a citizen of the Muscogee Creek Nation. Many of you know that nation, but we're located right there in the state of Oklahoma. But I'm also recognized as an active community member of my nation who was raised within the culture and traditions of my people. I identify singularly as Muscogee. I'm also the mother of one human daughter, Dina, and a dog son. Yes, I said dog, Oliver. This is my 3rd career. I have 4 degrees and a graduate certificate. I have an undergraduate degree in political science, an MBA in strategic management, then a master's of science in sociology and a PhD in sociology. I got my I got my master's of science in sociology at Oklahoma State Stillwater. And then I got my PhD at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I also got a graduate certificate in Indigenous Studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I previously worked in consumer finance for 13 years and then in nonprofit hunger relief for another 12 years. And I left those careers to go back to grad school and pursue that master's of science and PhD in sociology. Throughout the 5 years that it took me to achieve those degrees, I realized that I couldn't find myself or my people in the literature. in the academic literature. I realized that I could apply the concepts of sociology to the collective life experiences of other natives and to my life, but we were not well represented in the literature. So that became my driving motivation to center Indigenous peoples in the academic conversations around race, racism, and discrimination. As a critical theorist and Indigenous scholar, my goal is to bring social and academic awareness to non-natives about the impacts of the racialization of and racism against Native peoples. And so today's talk focuses on Native Indigenous student success in primarily white institutions. Okay, so I have a quick bit of housekeeping. Bear with me, it'll only take like another minute, I timed it. Passionate debate persists in academia and in our communities over the most useful terms to describe Indigenous peoples of what is currently known as the United States. I make no claim over which terms should be used, but offer the following thoughts. I work in the academy, but must live within my communities. Any terms other than what we call ourselves are racial terms imposed by colonizing forces. Indigenous nations, tribes, peoples are cultural and kinship and political and geographic entities. For the purpose of my research, I use the term American Indian because of its usage by federal agencies. I use the term Indian because it is the legal term used within federal Indian policy. I use and judicial review and other regulatory language. And I often use the terms Native and Indigenous as my preferences. And I apologize in advance for any distraction or messiness, but labels are the consequence of 5 centuries of colonial racism. And next I have to do a land acknowledgement before I can teach a thing. So before I dive into this talk, I'd like to begin with a formal acknowledgement of the lands on which we gather today. In the spirit of respect, responsibility, and reciprocity, we must acknowledge that the lands on which we learn, teach, work, live, and grow are the traditional and ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples. As professors, academic staff, and students, we must also acknowledge that academic institutions like the one I'm from, Colorado College, and Oklahoma State, were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. Maybe it doesn't have to be intentionally, right? I'm specifically located on the Ute people's ancestral lands, and Oklahoma State and its institutions are located on the traditional lands of the Osage, Wichita, and Caddo. Of course, there are a lot more tribes than that now, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. We have a responsibility to acknowledge our Indigenous connections, as well as the histories of dispossession and forced removal and relocation that have allowed for the growth and survival of our institutions, our beloved institutions. We also have a responsibility to recognize and highlight the continued social, intellectual, economic, and cultural contributions of Indigenous peoples to Colorado College, Oklahoma State University, Colorado, Oklahoma, and to all of society. So thank you for allowing me to do that. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen for a minute, and we'll go from there. I'll kind of toggle back and forth if that's okay. Let's see which one I'm on. Okay, here we go. And let's do that slideshow. Play from, and I'm going to go through here. This is my title page. Here's the land acknowledgement. This shows you Pikes Peak. One of the things that we did at Colorado College is that we renamed a quad that used to be Armstrong. We named it Tava because the Ute word for the Pikes Peak is Sun Mountain, so Tava. It's Tava Quad now. So the demographic overview, I'd really like to give you some of this. Tribal nations and their citizens. I'd like us to kind of start off there. So I want you to keep some questions in mind as we go through here. Like, what images come to your mind when you think of Native Americans, right? How many sovereign indigenous nations, federally recognized tribes, are there in the United States currently? How many different indigenous cultures have survived? What languages are spoken? What are some contributions that Native Americans have made to the United States? Past or present is fine. And who are some contemporary? And I say from 1900 to now because people have a really hard time with like right now. Some famous Native Americans. And what did you learn about Native Americans during K through 12? So here's the demographic overview of the tribal nations in the United States. We have 574 federally recognized tribes. 343 of those are located in the contiguous United States, 231 located in Alaska. 16 states have no tribal nations, 2.1 million tribal enrolled citizens, 3.7 million AIAN alone, they're affiliated with at least one federally recognized tribe, 5.9 alone or in combination with one other race, and then 9.7 million alone or in combination. These numbers have grown tremendously since the 2010 census, and we need to be very careful when we use them because of COVID really interrupting the census taking. So they may be underreported in so many ways, particularly on the larger reservations. There's 326 of those. And a reservation is a legal designation for an area of land that's used as permanent tribal homelands. It's managed by the tribal governments under the oversight of the BIA. The smallest one's 1.32 acres, the largest 16 million acres. That's where a lot of the inability to get any census data came in, was like the Navajo Nation and some of the others, because they had to close their borders. 22% of Natives live on reservations. 72% of us live in urban or suburban areas. Cultures, traditions, our cultures are all unique. So those 574, that's the 574 different traditions, ceremonies, histories, governance structures, and languages. Our languages, we have some of the ones that are from the same root, like the Siouan, the Muscogee, Muscogean, I'm sorry, not Muscogee, say another word, and then, so we have, or Iroquoian, so there's different language roots, but we all, the Choctaw, they speak the same language we do, as the Seminole do as well, yet it's different, right? We have different words. And Navajo is the most speakers. And, I think that it says something like less than, what does it say? 5%, 10%? I can't see it with my little bar right there. The American Indian population, you can see here that it is like just 50% or more. This particular map shows and tells the story of forced removal and relocation. It also tells the story of physical and cultural genocides, because you can see hardly anything is left on the East Coast, right? And I thought maybe this would be a little easier for you to kind of see like where the populations are. We're recording this, so these slides are available. I also will send a PDF of the slides if you want them later. Colton, thank you so much for that. This is a 2013 number. I thought I might do a little, maybe look at some Oklahoma demographics. I did a lot of work. I think anyone who does research knows that to be able to find this kind of percent, these different numbers, you have to go to a lot of different ways. And I said that looking for data in Oklahoma has currently, in the last couple of years, maybe 4, it's been more difficult to obtain data about race, ethnicity, And I know, and I do want us to let you know that tribal nations, we are sovereign nations, but we are racialized in a specific way. So we have to, use the data in that way. 38 federally recognized tribes, and we say 39 all the time. I looked and looked and looked, and we're constantly counting the Yuchi, but the Yuchis have not gained federal recognition yet. So that's a correct number from reading from the Federal Register. Isn't that interesting? 8.3% of all Oklahomans. I don't know why I have 8.4% was from the Bureau. I had another data and there was just a 10th, but I wanted to show you that 0.1% can mean something. But there's the economic impact for the Oklahoma. 35 tribal nations have tribal state compacts with Oklahoma. That provides 96,177 jobs. And of those jobs, 56% are occupied by non-tribal citizens. 56% of the jobs are occupied by women, 44% by men. Wages and benefits, the economic impact is 4.6 billion per year. Production of goods and services, 12.9, infrastructure, 42.6 million. Societal impact, we've saved over 88 million in Medicaid savings through IHS, and the exclusivity fees that come from those gaming revenues. That's where we pay the state to have gaming operations there. We've remitted 1.5 billion to Oklahoma since 2006. 250 of that goes immediately, every year, goes immediately to the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. 88% of the rest of it as fees that supports public education to all Oklahoma citizens, not just Native ones. And another 80.5 million goes to tribal education programs and scholarships. 96% of Oklahoma Indians are not fluent in tribal language, but they are amazing. We are our reclamation of that, but we bring so much. I mean, tourism, the fact that we have like all of the hotels and the eating establishments and the roads that we've built. I mean, it's the actual impact of tribal nations in Oklahoma is phenomenal. And I don't think that we get enough credit for that. So I want to make sure that you all could see what we do. The original Indigenous nations located in Oklahoma here. Thought that was important to know. This is the federally recognized Indian nations located in Oklahoma. And this little like cutout over here or pop out goes over in the very northeast corner of Oklahoma. These are political jurisdictional boundaries. They don't say who can come in and out, right? They're political. The Muscogee Nation Reservation, I wanted to, this with McGirt v. Oklahoma recently, and that dark, I don't know if that's pink, purple, I could call it any number of colors, is what really divides what was Indian territory. So an overview of status and trends in education of racial and ethnic groups in Oklahoma and US. I wanted to put together some slides for you to kind of like some data. We're all data driven. So the percentage of American Indian and Alaska Natives 16 to 24 years old enrolled in school for the combined years of 2016 and 2018. Most 16 to 24-year-old students or people are generally going to school, either in high school or in college. And what we're showing here is that American Indian and Alaska Native people, students attend school at a much lower level than the US average. And men less so than women. No high school diploma or alternative credential. I always think that's interesting when they say alternative credential, because what they really mean is a GED. These are dropout rates. And what we see here is the highest dropout rates are American Indian students and Alaska Native students. And the lowest is Asian Americans. And it continues in with this particular slide. One of the things that has really been brought to, so many of us who work in policy and work to inform policy, this is one of the biggest ones, is the fact that we have like a greater, like almost, 20% greater dropout rate in 2016. And what's the problem is in 2018, it grew to 25%. But that data is, we really have to clean it up a little bit before we're comfortable, most of us who do use statistical analysis to share it. But that's what I'm finding. Yeah, what am I doing here? Okay. Next, I wanted to show you educational attainment by race and ethnicity in the state of Oklahoma. So that's good. I really do enjoy being able to give statistics, nationwide, but let's get to Oklahoma, right? This is what you all want to know is like, what's going on there? And I had to create these. So what we find is that we're doing pretty darn good as far as like if we are to get a diploma, but look how bad we're doing like without. So you can see, except so the US is really, when it's saying in 25 years or older, it's saying like everyone that's over that. So the reason the average for Oklahoma versus the US is so much lower than actually by the breakout is because it's showing like people are 80, 75, whether they dropped out of school or not. And dropouts rates were much higher back then. You didn't have to have, or high school diplomas, you didn't have to have something like that to get a good job. This is important. I thought that this would be good to know. Like we have 40% of Native people who are going to school. Our Native men are the ones who are less likely to be enrolled in college in fall of 2016. Native women we're doing it. Young women, older women, we're doing it, but it's our Native men, if you see, it's only 40%. And those percentage points are important. They can be that's statistically significant. But this is where I think it gets really fun, is I wanted us to be able to see the bachelor's degrees, the select fields of studies for those of us who are going to college, right? So if you look at American Indian is this little like lined one here. And business, we're doing a pretty good job here, right? We're right in line with the total, 19%. Health, professional, we're a little, we're not quite the way, and I don't generally use the term Hispanic, but it is the term that's used within data analysis. But Latinx people and are really even doing less well than we are when it comes to health professions. And I hate to say like less well, but but I think it is all really encouraging to see 12% versus 10 versus 11%, right? That's encouraging to me. Social sciences and history, we're right in line with everybody else. The two or more races, and also that's where Hispanic people are like shining, right? Latinx people, they're going, hey, this is what we really like. Psychology, there's been a real call for Indigenous American Indian students to enroll. There's been scholarships, all that sort of thing. But let's look at biological and biomedical. That's a little concerning for me, right? We are in line, 5%, but here at Colorado College, we have it's a small liberal arts college, very small student body, but we have larger percentages of all of our Native students who come, which is less than 1%, but they are heavily concentrated in the STEM disciplines. And I really see that the STEM disciplines is increasing. But where they go, when you find these students who are Native, where they end up going are either to exclusive colleges or to Ivy League colleges and that sort of thing. So I think that public universities are going to have to really start to offer major, they're going to have to change some things, and they're also going to have to offer some scholarships. Nope, I'm not doing that one. Okay, these are the issues for some of our students, right? Because they are earning far less than white workers. This is 1988 to 2019 data, using census data in real dollars. And if you see the comparison of like all locations is the dark line, and then the dotted line, of course, is in non-metropolitan. I mean, the amount of money in rural areas, and Oklahoma is really considered pretty rural. Tulsa and Oklahoma City is okay, Lawton because of the base, but this is something that you all will want to think about, is the actual dollars that are being earned. Because without money, what do you have? Maybe you don't have the supplies, maybe you don't have the other resources. This is important because I thought of you as your medical science center, non-elderly adults with selected health conditions by race, ethnicity, okay? And when we look at every single one, asthma, diabetes, heart attack, or heart disease, every one of them, we are so far over. And it's really important to recognize that, because that tells a story. Most people will be like, well, it's because you people don't take care of yourselves. That's not what this is about. This is about what type of air are we breathing? Where are we located? Where have we been? Where is the housing, right? Oklahoma has, some top sites there's pollution. And I think that's really important to recognize. Diabetes, like who has the money, and what food is available in these rural areas? Are there food deserts? What's going on with that? I think it's really important to take that in, and also the history of Indian commodities and how that really set us up for the way that we eat today. Anyway, I hope you find that interesting. Experience housing problems on the average in the United States. I mean, what can we say? The conditions and facilities, 23% of American Indians deal with, our housing problems. I mean, our facilities and the condition problems, and then the overcrowding. I wanted to talk about Indian boarding schools because I was asked to, but I don't, I'm not going to talk in depth about them because, to be honest with you, my family they've been in Indian boarding schools, and it's a tough topic with over 4,600 young Native children being found in grave sites across Canada and the United States. I think it might be 6,400. I may have that transposed, but we can definitely say 4,600. So the top 5 states for Indian boarding schools. Oklahoma is number 1. 73 remain open today, and 15 are still boarding. The Muscogee Nation has a boarding school. It's an opportunity for us to help students. We run it in a way that is to really bring students out of a substandard schooling education kind of deal. So if they're really testing badly, if they're unhappy at home, if they're or if they just want to be with other Indigenous students, they can be there. But to be honest with you, I don't find boarding schools to be as, the histories need to be understood before we can actually decolonize them and have them as true centers of culture and understanding and protection and growth. I don't know who's seen this picture, but I couldn't talk about boarding schools without talking about these handcuffs. These handcuffs are, they've been found, they were found at, in Pennsylvania, right? At the boarding school there. And then also there was some, I think, found in Tahlequah, and they had to like validate that those were used. They didn't look the same, but there's still some validation issues going on with those. But these are children's handcuffs, and they were used to handcuff children and make them attend boarding schools. My research, my qualitative research, has people discussing how their language was taken, how they were beaten, how other people in mine say that boarding schools in the 70s and 80s was the best thing that ever happened to them. They were able to, like, you know, be themselves, be around. I have a colleague right now at Colorado College who says, you know, that she left Colorado to go to a boarding school in Oklahoma so that she wasn't made fun of and talked about and given like being called, you know, particular denigrating names. And so there is like this thing. But when boarding schools were originated, they were workplaces, they work schools, they were houses. They were not about teaching. They were teaching, like, you got to sew jeans, you have to, you know, they were workhouses. It's just really important to know that. Second, it was a place where all of our culture, all of our languages were stripped from us, and we weren't really allowed to use them. Students still snuck behind places and spoke what they called Indian, right? That's how they say it. We still talked Indian. That's in my research. But boarding schools are not anything that so one of the reasons I want to say for non-natives is to really help you position why Native students may not feel comfortable being in schools, may still have some generational, cross-generational, like, distrust of schools. I know my mother did distrust a lot of that. So there's also a digital divide. Native students have the lowest percentage of home internet access. 34% of them have no high-speed internet access. There's another 10% that only has internet access through a smartphone. So decolonizing. Oh, wait, let me read that. Confronting our responsibility. So you're not doing anybody any favors. It's a responsibility to confront and to decolonize higher education. It's better for all of us. There's consequences of erasure and invisibility. This is the biggest thing Native students say all the time. They're like, I am erased. I am invisible. When I introduced myself to you, I said it was one of the biggest driving, motivating factors of doing the work I do is I couldn't see myself. I couldn't find myself in the literature. I couldn't find myself as a contributing member. If it was, I was either, my people, Native peoples, were framed as savages or simple or very stoic, not loud, not intelligent. We were either spiritual, never intellectual. And so it's really important for us to to disrupt those stereotypes in our own minds, our own hearts first, and then within the areas that we have influence and control, because it's just not true. Our populations are exploding, going through the roof. And it says most people believe that the Native population is declining. And most people don't think about Native people much at all. Invisibility is in essence a modern form of racism. And it is this invisibility that leads to a college access and completion crisis among Native American students. So when you saw all of those previous slides, we're taught to think of it as like an individual's term, like, well, if only those people would, you know, they just don't care about college the way these good students do. No, it's not that at all. There's no, I mean, how would you feel about going to like these places that you haven't been welcomed before, and then to not even feel comfortable discussing your own culture, speaking in your own languages or anything? So students start to feel alienated, alone, and it really derails their matriculation. And so I think that it's really important that as faculty, staff, academic staff, we have to really begin to first decolonize our own minds and then, you know, have that influence. The forms of disadvantage, I thought I'd stick it all together for you here. Many of us are first generation. These are disadvantages that are other, that are given to us through society. These aren't things that we've done to ourselves. The less parental oversight and engagement generally means they're having to work more than one job. It's not like they're like, oh, I don't care about my kids, right? It's like when people are in such poverty, they have to work multiple jobs to be able to even meet the standard of care for themselves, rent, food. And then through the colonization, the lack of the cultural capital for coping and this sort of thing. Racism, lack of interaction with non-Native students. It's not that Native students don't want to be friends. It's that other students don't invite Native students into their friend groups. Systemic ignorance. Man, I really hope that you all read this one. It's largely tolerated and reinforced. And peers, professors, staff, and society are not held accountable to know Indigenous histories. And there's a delegitimization of tribal knowledges, and then we have socioeconomic and structural oppression. So real talk, a lot of you on here are Native, so this doesn't really, you don't count. We're, you know, and maybe some people who watch this later, right? Maybe they'll start. What images come to mind? These? Yeah, this is, I mean, I know this is what I'm thinking about when people say American Indians or Indians. I'm like, yeah, you're going back to that old trope of cowboys versus Indians. And it was never cowboys versus Indians. Some of the most cowboying people I know are Indians, but it was always settlers versus Indians and soldiers versus Indians. But do you know these people? Do you know these people? These are people that we should know. I have to, here we go. Had this already printed out so I can kind of like make sure I say it correctly. Over in the left-hand corner, John Harrington, Chickasaw astronaut and aeronautical engineer. In the middle, Maria Talchi, the first prima ballerina in the United States, our first. And if you don't know Wes Studi, I mean, he gives me life, y'all. I love this man. Met him, he's a phenomenal. This is someone you really need to know right here. This is Thomas David Petit. He's Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa tribe. He is the inventor in wireless communications. He's the reason you have smart homes. He has 50 patents and has done such phenomenal, like groundbreaking work in wireless communications, and offers scholarships, really gives back to Indigenous students. Then we have Jim Thorpe. Hey, Sac and Fox, still not at home. He's not still not home, but he was, 2 Olympic medals, and he was the first president of what we now know as the NFL. We have Mary G. Ross, Cherokee, aerospace engineer. We have Aaron Yazzie. He's a NASA mechanical engineer. He's Dena, Navajo. And his technology is currently at work on the Mars InSight lander. He's working on the Mars mission, actually worked on that 2020 mission, and he's doing more on that. So brilliant, right? Of course, Joy Harjo, Muscogee, first poet laureate. And then Sandra Begay. I'm sorry, not Begay. I'm sorry, that is Diane. Sorry about that. That is Diane Humatawa, who is a Hopi federal judge. And then last but not least, Fred Begay, who is a nuclear physicist right here. He took his work and said the reason he was able to really be this brilliant person is that he said his culture inculcated the intuition of abstract ideas. So was able to really tie it back to his culture. So ensuring this, let me kind of get through here. I'm running a couple of minutes late here. So strategies of success. These are some important things we all need to know. The proven factors are having mentors. I know that I've had mentors that are non-native, but they always appreciated and situated me within my culture. They never expected me to assimilate. Family support, of course, that's for anyone. Interaction with Indigenous communities, y'all. Program peer group, Native professors across all disciplines, all fields. To be able to have professors, you have to pay for them to go to school. You have to support them to get the PhDs. You have to get them through there. Students, everywhere I've taught for the last 15, 20 years, students always tell me, every student tells me, I'm sometimes, particularly outside of Oklahoma, I'm the first Native person they've met. Even Native students say, I'm the first professor, not teacher, not lecturer, the first professor they have ever had. And most times, first teacher as well. That's really got to be our goal, right? Land acknowledgement, Native administrators. So glad to see you there, Colton. Curriculum includes Native languages, Native histories, cultures, dedicated physical space. And then an ethic of care. And that's what my mentors really had for me, was an ethic of care. And understanding the differences in culture. Not just one culture, like that's the Native culture, no, all the cultures. We wouldn't, I always think about this, we wouldn't treat like an Italian student the same as we would treat like maybe a Chinese student. We understand their different cultures, and yet we think all natives are alike. And we just treat them like you need to assimilate. You need to assimilate. This is an important part. And I think that the Declaration of Native Purpose in Higher Education, we believe it's your responsibility, universities, colleges. We believe that there needs to be senior leadership at those. Listening, learning, and engaging with us. Making visible that these are our homelands. Incorporating our knowledges. And, that land acknowledgement. Mado, I'm going to stop sharing now, but please have questions.